Frank Daniels drove his black pickup truck down the narrow dirt road. Trees lined both sides, their branches making a tunnel of green above him. After 3 years without a break, he finally had time off. As the head of state police, Frank rarely got to rest. His job kept him busy day and night, dealing with crimes and keeping people safe across the state. The truck bumped over rocks and roots as Frank checked his map. According to the directions, his new cabin was just around the next bend. He had bought it 3 weeks ago but hadn't seen it in person yet. The real estate agent had sent photos and handled all the paperwork while Frank worked on a big drug case. "This is exactly what I need," Frank said to himself as the cabin came into view. It was made of dark logs with a stone chimney, a small porch wrapped around the front with 2 wooden chairs facing the trees. No other houses were visible in any direction. The closest neighbor was 5 miles away, and the nearest town was 20 miles down the mountain. Frank parked and stepped out of his truck. The air smelled like pine and dirt. Birds called from the trees, and somewhere far off a stream bubbled over rocks. Frank took a deep breath and smiled. No police radio, no ringing phone, no emergencies to handle. Just peace and quiet for 2 whole weeks. He unlocked the cabin door and carried in his bags. The inside was simple but nice. A living room with a stone fireplace took up most of the space. A small kitchen sat in one corner with wooden counters and basic appliances. A hallway led to 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Everything was clean and ready for him. Frank unpacked his clothes and food. He put 3 fishing rods by the door and his books on the coffee table. Then he went outside and hung up 4 bird feeders around the porch. Birds were one of his few hobbies, something he rarely had time for back in the city. For 2 days, Frank enjoyed his vacation. He woke up late, made big breakfasts, went fishing in the nearby lake, and sat on his porch watching birds come to his feeders. He read half of a mystery novel and took long walks in the woods. His mind began to relax for the first time in years. On the 3rd morning, Frank was still in bed when a loud knock woke him up. He looked at his watch. It was only 7:30 a.m. Who could be at his door? No one knew he was here except his deputy director, Olivia. Frank pulled on jeans and a t-shirt. The knocking continued, getting louder and more forceful. He walked to the door, suddenly alert. Years of police work had taught him to be careful. He opened the door to find a man standing on his porch. The man wore a gray suit that didn't fit well and had slicked back hair. He held a clipboard and had a fake-looking smile. "Good morning, sir," the man said in a too loud voice. "Gary Peterson, Pine Lake Homeowners Association. May I come in? We have some urgent matters to discuss about your property." Frank frowned. "Homeowners Association? There's no HOA out here. That's part of why I bought this place." Gary's smile didn't change. "Oh, I assure you, sir, Pine Lake HOA has been operating for 3 years now. All properties in this area fall under our rules." He held up his clipboard. "I have the documentation right here." Frank didn't invite him in but stepped onto the porch. "Let me see that." The paper on the clipboard had a fancy logo at the top that said, Pine Lake Homeowners Association, with a picture of pine trees and a lake. The paper listed rules about house colors, lawn care, decorations, and other things. At the bottom was a line for signatures. "I've noted several violations during my inspection this morning," Gary said, pointing to his list. "Non-regulation exterior paint, unauthorized wildlife feeding stations, improper vehicle parking. The fines add up to $3,000, but if you sign up for membership today and pay the remediation fee, we can reduce that to $2,500. Frank looked from the paper to Gary. Something felt wrong. He had been a cop for 20 years and could spot a liar easily. Gary was sweating too much for the cool morning air and his eyes kept darting around. "I'd like to see the HOA bylaws and the property agreement that says my land is included," Frank said calmly. Gary's smile tightened. "Of course I have those in my car, but first we should handle these immediate violations. We wouldn't want them to increase, would we?" He pulled out another paper. "This is a payment form. We accept checks or money orders." Frank decided to play along. His instincts told him this was a scam, but he wanted more information. Why don't you come in for coffee while I get my checkbook? It's cold out here. Gary looked surprised but pleased. That would be great, thank you. Frank led him into the cabin and pointed to the small dining table. Have a seat. How do you take your coffee? Black is fine, Gary said, sitting down and arranging his papers. Frank went to the kitchen area and started making coffee. From this position, he could watch Gary while pretending to be busy. Gary was looking around the cabin, taking note of what was inside. He seemed especially interested in a locked gun cabinet in the corner. So, Gary, Frank said casually, how many homes are in this HOA? 43 properties, Gary answered quickly. All the cabins and houses within 5 miles of Pine Lake. Frank nodded. And when did you say it started? 3 years ago. The association was formed to maintain property values and ensure consistent standards. Frank brought 2 cups of coffee to the table and sat across from Gary. That's interesting. I bought this place 3 weeks ago, and my real estate agent never mentioned an HOA. Neither did the county records. Gary's smile faltered for a second. Some agents forget to mention it. That's why I'm here, to make sure new owners get properly registered. Frank sipped his coffee. I need to make a quick call to my bank about this check. Excuse me for a minute. Gary nodded, looking at his watch nervously. Of course, but I can't stay long. I have other properties to visit today. Frank walked into the bedroom and closed the door. He quickly dialed a number on his cell phone. Martinez, a woman's voice answered. Olivia, it's Frank. I need a quick favor. Olivia, it's Frank. I need a quick favor, Frank said into his phone, keeping his voice low. I thought you were on vacation, Olivia Martinez replied. She was the deputy director of the state police and Frank's most trusted colleague. I am, but something strange is happening. There's a man in my cabin claiming to be from a homeowners association. He wants me to pay $3,000 for breaking rules I never agreed to. A homeowners association? At your cabin in the middle of nowhere? Exactly, Frank said. Can you run a check on a Gary Peterson? Also, see if there's any registered HOA called Pine Lake in this county. Give me 5 minutes, Olivia said. Frank could hear her typing already. Thanks. I'll keep him talking. Frank ended the call and walked back to the kitchen. Gary was looking at his watch and tapping his fingers on the table. Sorry about that, Frank said, sitting down again. The bank needs a bit more information before I can write such a large check. Mind if I see your business card? Gary reached into his pocket and handed Frank a card. It said, Gary Peterson, Community Standards Officer, Pine Lake HOA, with a phone number and email address. How many people work for this HOA? Frank asked, studying the card. The print quality was poor, and there was no physical address listed. We have a board of 5 directors and 3 officers like myself, Gary said quickly. Now about that payment. And where are your offices located? Frank continued, ignoring Gary's attempt to rush him. Gary hesitated. We operate remotely to keep costs down for our members. Most business is handled by phone or email. Frank's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Olivia. No Gary Peterson in state database matching description. No registered HOA called Pine Lake in entire state. Man's car has plates registered. To Nathan Wells. Wanted in 3 states for fraud. Frank kept his face neutral as he read the message. He needed to be careful now. This man was a criminal, possibly dangerous. One more question, Frank said. Who's the president of your HOA? Board? I'd like to speak with them directly. Gary's face tightened. Mr. Harris is very busy and doesn't take calls from residents. That's why I'm here. Now, if you could just write that check, I can be on my way. Frank stood up. I need to get my checkbook from the bedroom. Make yourself comfortable. Once in the bedroom, Frank quickly texted Olivia. Send backup, but tell them no sirens, no rush. I want to get more info first. Olivia replied immediately. Already on the way. ETA 25 minutes. Be careful. Frank tucked his badge into his back pocket and returned to the kitchen. Gary was standing now, looking out the window at the forest. Beautiful view you have here, Gary said. Lots of nice properties in these woods. I visited 5 other cabins this morning. Frank nodded. How many people paid the fine? All of them, Gary said with a small smile. People don't want trouble with their HOA. It can make selling a property very difficult. Frank pulled out a chair. Tell me more about these rules. If I'm going to be part of this HOA, I should understand everything. Gary seemed pleased that Frank was cooperating. He sat down and began explaining the fake rules in detail. Frank listened and asked questions, encouraging Gary to talk more. Every minute he kept Gary talking was another minute for backup to get closer. Gary showed Frank more papers with fake rules about everything from garbage cans to holiday decorations. The man was thorough in his scam, with official-looking documents and stamps. You mentioned other cabins, Frank said. How many people are in this HOA again? 43 properties, Gary repeated from earlier. And how much does each person pay in yearly dues? $2,200, plus any fines for violations, Gary said. It's very reasonable for the services we provide. Frank did the math in his head. If this scam was real, Gary and his partners were collecting over $50,000 a year, plus thousands more in fake fines. And how do you decide which properties to visit for inspections? Frank asked. Gary smiled. We have a rotation system. Some properties get more attention than others, especially the more remote ones where owners don't live year-round. In other words, Frank thought, they target people who aren't around much and might not talk to neighbors. Smart, but illegal. Frank's phone buzzed again. Another text from Olivia. Officers 10 minutes out, positioned on Access Road. I think I'm ready to write that check now, Frank said. But first, can I see some identification? Just so I know who to make it out to. Gary frowned. The check should be made to Pine Lake HOA. I still need to see your ID, Frank insisted. Standard procedure when I'm writing checks this large. Gary hesitated, then reached for his wallet. He pulled out a driver's license and handed it to Frank. Frank looked at it closely. The name on the license was Gary Peterson, but the photo didn't quite match the man sitting across from him. The license was from Idaho, not this state. This seems to be expired, Frank said calmly. Gary grabbed the license back. It's just an old one. Look, do you want to pay the fine or not? If not, it will double by next month. Before I pay, I have one more question, Frank said. How many other people are working this scam with you, Nathan? Gary's face went pale. What did you call me? Frank stood up and pulled his badge from his pocket. Colonel Frank Daniels, head of state police. Nathan Wells, you're under arrest for fraud, impersonation, and extortion. Nathan jumped to his feet, knocking over his coffee cup. He lunged for the door, but Frank was faster. Years of police training kicked in as Frank grabbed Nathan's arm and twisted it behind his back. Bad move, Frank said, pushing Nathan against the wall while keeping his arm locked. Resisting arrest is another charge to add to your list. You can't prove anything, Nathan gasped. The fake documents, the false identification, and the recorded conversation on my phone say otherwise, Frank replied. Now we're going to have a long talk about those other cabins you visited, and especially about who you're working for. Outside, the sound of cars approaching echoed through the trees. Frank's backup had arrived. 3 police cars pulled up outside Frank's cabin. Olivia Martinez was the first one out, followed by 5 state troopers in uniform. They walked quickly to the cabin with their hands near their weapons. Olivia knocked on the door. Frank? Everything okay in there? Come in, Olivia, Frank called. I've got our friend secured. Olivia opened the door and saw Frank holding Nathan against the wall. Nathan had stopped struggling and was breathing hard. Nathan Wells, Olivia said, looking at the man. We've been looking for you for quite a while. Frank handed Nathan over to 2 of the troopers, who put handcuffs on him and read him his rights. They took him outside to one of the police cars. So much for your vacation, Olivia said to Frank. Frank shrugged. It was too quiet anyway. Tell me what you found. Olivia pulled out her tablet and showed Frank a file. Nathan Wells, age 42, wanted, in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Ohio for similar scams. He targets vacation homes and remote properties, pretending to be from fake homeowners associations. How much has he taken? Frank asked. At least $200,000 that we know of. But he doesn't work alone. There are at least 5 others using the same scam in different areas. Frank frowned. He mentioned a total of 43 properties in this area alone. If they each paid the yearly fee plus fines, that's over $50,000 from just one small region. This is bigger than we thought, Olivia said, and more organized. Frank picked up Nathan's fake business cards and documents from the table. These are well made. Not perfect, but good enough to fool most people. And look at this. He showed Olivia a list that had fallen from Nathan's clipboard. These are addresses. Probably his next targets. We need to question him, Olivia said. Frank nodded. Let's use the cabin. No need to drive all the way back to headquarters yet. Bring him back in. The troopers brought Nathan back inside and sat him down at the kitchen table. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked nervous but not scared. Nathan, Frank said, sitting across from him, you're in serious trouble. Fraud, extortion, resisting arrest. That's years in prison. Nathan said nothing and stared at the table. But, Frank continued, if you help us, I can talk to the district attorney about reducing those charges. Nathan looked up. What do you want to know? Who are you working with? Who's in charge? Frank asked. Nathan shook his head. I can't tell you that. They'll kill me. Frank leaned forward. We can protect you. But if you don't cooperate, you're going to prison for a long time. Your partners won't help you then. Nathan thought for a moment. What's the deal if I talk? Depends on what you tell us and if it leads to arrests, Olivia said. I need guarantees, Nathan insisted. Frank stood up. Let's be clear. You came to my door and tried to steal from me. You've stolen from dozens of others. You don't get to make demands. The only question is how long you'll be in prison. Nathan was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed. Fine. What do you want to know? Everything, Frank said. Start with how many people are in your group. 12, Nathan said. We work in teams of 2 across this state and 2 others. Who runs the operation? Olivia asked. A guy named Vincent Harmon. Used to be a real estate developer until he lost his license for fraud 5 years ago. Now he finds the properties and gives us the information. We do the collections. Frank wrote this down. How does he find the properties? He has someone who hacks into county records. They look for recent sales of vacation properties to people who live far away. Perfect targets. And how do you split the money? Olivia asked. Harmon gets 50%. The rest is split between whoever collects it. We each have our own territory. Frank showed Nathan the list of addresses. These are your next targets? Nathan nodded. I was supposed to hit all of them this week. We work fast, especially in summer when more owners visit their properties. Where is Harmon now? Frank asked. He has a house on Warren Lake, about 40 miles from here. Big place with a boat dock. He stays there most of the time. Frank looked at Olivia. Get a team to that location right away, and check if we can get a warrant. Olivia stepped outside to make the call. Frank continued questioning Nathan. How do you avoid getting caught? Some people must check if the HOA is real. Most don't, Nathan said. They just pay to avoid trouble. For those who ask questions, we have fake websites and phone numbers that redirect to our people. If someone gets too suspicious, we just move on. Plenty of other targets. But you have warrants in 3 states, Frank pointed out. So you do get caught sometimes. Nathan shrugged. Those were early mistakes. We've gotten better. Olivia came. Back inside. Team is on the way to Harmon's place. Judge is signing the warrant now. We should have it within the hour. Good, Frank said. Nathan, we need names and locations of all your partners. If I tell you that, I want witness protection, Nathan demanded. These guys are serious. Frank and Olivia exchanged looks. We'll talk to the DA, Frank said. But first we need those names. Nathan gave them 6 names and described the other 6 people whose names he didn't know. He drew a map showing which areas each team covered. What about your current collections? Frank asked. Where's the money you've already taken from people around here? In the trunk of my car. About $17,000 so far this week. Frank signaled to a trooper. Check his car and secure the evidence. The trooper nodded and went outside. One more thing, Frank said to Nathan. How do you convince people to pay? Some must refuse. We have a script, Nathan explained. If they refuse to pay, we threaten legal action. Say we'll put a lien on their property. Most people don't know how that works, so they get scared and pay. Frank shook his head. Preying on people's lack of knowledge, that's low. Nathan had no response to that. Olivia's phone rang. She answered it and listened for a moment. They got the warrant for Harmon's place. Team will be there in 20 minutes. Good, Frank said. Let's head there now. I want to be there when they bring him in. He turned to Nathan. You're going to help us build a case against Harmon and the others. If you're honest and helpful, I'll keep my word about talking to the DA. Nathan nodded slowly. Just keep me away from Harmon. He has connections. Frank stood up. Olivia, have 2 officers drive him to headquarters for formal processing. We'll take my truck to Harmon's place. As they walked outside, Frank looked back at his cabin. His peaceful vacation had turned into a major fraud investigation. But somehow, he didn't mind. This was the kind of work he lived for, stopping people who took advantage of others. Frank drove his truck fast along the winding forest roads. Olivia sat next to him, talking on her phone and coordinating the team heading to Vincent Harmon's lake house. 2 police cars followed behind them. The team is in position around Harmon's property, Olivia said, putting down her phone. They're waiting for us before moving in. Good, Frank said. What do we know about Harmon? Olivia read from her tablet. Vincent Harmon, age 53. Former real estate developer in Chicago. Lost his license 5 years ago for fraudulent practices. He sold properties that didn't exist and took money from investors for fake development projects. And now he's moved. On to fake HOAs, Frank said. Smart evolution of his scam. They drove for another 30 minutes before reaching Warren Lake. It was larger than the lake near Frank's cabin, with expensive houses dotting the shoreline. Most had private docks with boats tied up. That's Harmon's place, Olivia said, pointing to a large 2-story house with gray siding and a wraparound deck. A speedboat was tied to a dock that extended into the lake. Frank parked his truck on a service road about a quarter mile from the house. 2 unmarked police cars and a van were already there. 6 officers in tactical gear stood waiting. Colonel Daniels, one of the officers said, nodding at Frank. We've been watching the house for 20 minutes. Harmon is inside with 2 other people. 1 man, 1 woman. Any signs they know we're coming? Frank asked. No, sir. They seem relaxed. The woman is sunbathing on the deck, and the men are drinking beer inside. We can see them through the windows. Frank looked at the warrant on Olivia's tablet. We're good to go. Standard approach. I want Harmon taken alive and talking. The officer nodded. Yes, sir. We'll move in from 3 sides. Lakeside is covered by a boat team. Frank turned to Olivia. You and I will go in after the team secures the house. I want to question Harmon myself. The tactical team put on their gear and checked their weapons. Then they moved silently through the trees toward Harmon's house. Frank and Olivia followed at a distance, watching as the team split into 3 groups approaching the house from different angles. Through his binoculars, Frank could see a woman in a swimsuit lying on a deck chair. A man came out onto the deck, carrying 2 glasses. He was tall with gray hair and looked to be in his 50s. That would be Harmon. The team leader gave a signal, and all 3 groups moved at once. They rushed onto the property, weapons drawn. State police. Freeze. Hands. Where we can see them. The woman on the deck screamed. Harmon dropped the glasses, which shattered on the deck. He turned to run back into the house, but officers were already coming through the door. The second man tried to run toward the dock, but the boat team was waiting. Within seconds, all 3 people were on the ground being handcuffed. Frank and Olivia walked onto the property once the scene was secure. The team leader came over to them. House is clear, sir. No one else inside. We found a laptop open on the kitchen table with what looks like property records on the screen. Good work, Frank said. Take the two accomplices to the station for questioning. We'll handle Harmon. The officers led the woman and the second man to waiting police cars. Another officer brought Harmon, now handcuffed, to where Frank and Olivia stood. Vincent Harmon looked like a businessman, not a criminal. He wore expensive clothes and had a confident smile despite the handcuffs. "Vincent Harmon?" Frank asked. "Yes," Harmon replied. "And I'd like to know why state police are raiding my vacation home." Frank showed him his badge. "Colonel Frank Daniels, head of state police, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and operating a criminal enterprise." Harmon's smile didn't fade. "Those are serious charges, Colonel. I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Frank said. "We've arrested Nathan Wells, who has told us all about your fake HOA scam." For the first time, Harmon's confidence slipped. His smile vanished and his eyes narrowed. "Nathan talks too much," he said quietly. "Let's continue this inside," Frank suggested, away from the sun. They took Harmon into his house and sat him at his dining room table. An officer stood by the door while Frank and Olivia sat across from Harmon. "We know about your operation," Frank said. 12 people running fake HOA scams across 3 states. We know you provide the property information and take half the money." "You have no proof," Harmon said. Olivia turned the laptop that was on the table. "This looks like proof to me. County property records, recent sales, owner information, all neatly organized by location." Harmon said nothing. "We've frozen your bank accounts," Frank continued. "We'll find the money you've stolen. And Nathan has given us names of your other team members. They're being picked up as we speak." "Nathan is a liar," Harmon said. "You can't trust anything he says." "Maybe," Frank agreed. "But when we arrest your other people, they'll talk too. Everyone will try to make a deal. That's how it works." Harmon leaned back in his chair. "I want a lawyer." "Of course," Frank said. "But before that, let me tell you what's going to happen. You're looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Fraud across state lines makes this a federal case. Or," Olivia added, "you can cooperate now. Tell us everything. Return the money to the people you stole from. And maybe you'll only serve 5 to 7 years." Harmon looked between them. "How did you catch us?" "We've been running this for 2 years without problems." Frank smiled. "Bad luck. You sent Nathan to the wrong cabin." "What do you mean?" "My cabin," Frank said. "I'm the head of state police, and Nathan tried to scam me." Harmon closed his eyes and sighed. "That idiot. I told him to stick to the list I gave him." "Your operation was clever," Frank admitted. "Target remote properties where owners don't know their neighbors. Create fake documents that look official enough. Most people would rather pay than deal with legal trouble." "It worked until now," Harmon said bitterly. An officer came into the room. "Sir, we found a safe in the bedroom. Need the combination?" Frank looked at Harmon. "Want to cooperate?" Harmon thought for a moment. "The combination is 42-18-7. There's cash inside and some documents." Frank nodded at the officer who left to open the safe. "Smart move," Frank said to Harmon. "Keep making good choices like that and things will go better for you." Harmon leaned forward. "I want a deal in writing. I'll give you everything, names, bank accounts, records of all the properties we targeted. But I want it in writing that I'll serve no more than 5 years." Frank and Olivia exchanged looks. "We'll talk to the district attorney," Olivia said. "If your information is good, I think we can make that happen." The officer returned carrying a metal box. "We found $43,000 in cash, sir, and these folders with lists of properties and payment records." Frank took one of the folders and opened it. Inside were detailed records of every property they had targeted, how much they had collected, and dates of collection. "Evidence doesn't get much better than this," Frank said, showing the folder to Olivia. "Mr. Harmon, I think it's time for you to come with us to headquarters. We have a lot to discuss." 2 months passed quickly. Frank Daniels stood at the podium in the state police headquarters press room. Camera flashes lit up his face as reporters took pictures. Behind him was a large board showing photos of Vincent Harmon and his 11 accomplices, plus charts detailing their fake HOA scheme. Today I'm pleased to announce that all 12 members of the criminal enterprise have been charged and convicted, Frank said to the crowd of reporters. Thanks to the hard work of our officers and prosecutors, this group will no longer be able to prey on property owners across our region. A reporter raised her hand. Colonel Daniels, how much money did this group steal in total? Our investigation found they collected over $600,000 from more than 200 victims in 3 states over the past 2 years, Frank answered. We've recovered about $320,000 so far, which will be returned to the victims. Another reporter stood up. Is it true that you personally discovered this scam while on vacation? Frank nodded. Yes, one of the criminals knocked on the door of my cabin pretending to be from a fake homeowners association. It was pure bad luck for them, but good luck for the public. The room filled with laughter. What sentence did Vincent Harmon receive? Asked a reporter in the back. Harmon cooperated fully with our investigation, which helped us catch all his associates and recover much of the stolen money. Because of this cooperation, he received a reduced sentence of 6 years in federal prison. Frank answered a few more questions, then ended the press conference. Olivia was waiting for him in the hallway. Nice job, she said. The commissioner is very happy with how this case turned out. It was a team effort, Frank replied. Any update on the restitution payments to the victims? The first checks go out next week. We've identified about 80% of the victims so far. The rest will take more time to find. Frank nodded. Good. That's what matters most, making sure these people get their money back. They walked together to Frank's office. Inside, Frank looked at his calendar. I still have a week of vacation time left, he said. I think I might actually use it this time. Olivia smiled. Going back to your cabin? Yes, I never did get to finish that book I was reading. Frank paused. But this time I'm putting a no soliciting sign on the door. 3 days later, Frank was back at his cabin in the woods. The summer weather was perfect, warm days and cool nights. He spent his mornings fishing at the lake and his afternoons reading on the porch. His bird feeders were full again, attracting blue jays and cardinals. On his second evening, Frank's phone rang. It was Olivia. Sorry to bother your vacation again, she said when he answered. I thought you'd want to know that we found 20 more victims of the HOA scam in the northern part of the state. Were you able to recover their money? Frank asked. Yes. We found another $45,000 in a storage unit that belonged to one of Harmon's associates. We're sending checks to these victims next week. That's good news, Frank said. Anything else? Yes, actually. Remember how Harmon got his property information? He mentioned someone who hacked into county records? I remember. Did you find that person? Better than that, Olivia said. Based on Harmon's information, the FBI traced the hacks to a tech company in Chicago. They arrested the company's IT director yesterday. Turns out he was selling data from multiple county offices across the Midwest. Frank whistled. So this was even bigger than we thought. Much bigger. The FBI thinks this data was being used for various scams, not just the fake HOA one. They're investigating at least 3 other fraud rings that might have used the same source. Keep me updated, Frank said. But not too much. I'm trying to relax here. Olivia laughed. Enjoy your vacation, boss. You earned it. After hanging up, Frank walked out onto his porch with a cup of coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. In the distance, an owl hooted. His thoughts turned to the case. What had started with a simple knock on his door had led to uncovering a major fraud operation spanning 3 states. Hundreds of people had been victimized, but now they would get justice and hopefully their money back. Frank had been a police officer for over 20 years, and cases like this reminded him why he had chosen this career. It wasn't about the excitement or the authority. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves and catching those who took advantage of others. The next morning, Frank was making breakfast when he heard a car coming up his road. He looked out the window and saw a postal service truck. The mail carrier got out and walked to Frank's door with a package. Frank opened the door. Morning, he said to the young man in the postal uniform. Good morning, sir. Package for you. The carrier handed Frank a box and a signature form. Frank signed for the package and thanked him. Inside the cabin, he opened the box and found a wooden sign that read "No soliciting state police property." There was a note from Olivia. "Thought this might help keep your vacation uninterrupted this time." Frank laughed and went outside to hang the sign on a tree near his driveway. 2 days later, Frank's vacation was ending. He packed his fishing gear and books into his truck. Before leaving, he stood on the porch one last time, looking at the forest around his cabin. Despite the interruption, it had been a good vacation after all. He felt rested and ready to return to work. As he drove down the dirt road, Frank passed his new sign and smiled. Next time, he would get a full 2 weeks of peace and quiet. But part of him didn't mind how things had turned out. The fake HOA scammers had targeted hundreds of innocent property owners, and now those scammers were in prison where they belonged. Frank turned onto the main road heading back to the city. His radio crackled with a message from headquarters. Even before his vacation was officially over, duty was calling, and Frank Daniels, head of state police, was ready to answer. "This is Daniels," he said into the radio. "I'm on my way.